Welcome back, everyone. Welcome back to another episode of the Everybody Eats podcast. This is our first episode of 2021. I'm excited. So it's a blessing to continue to be doing this in the new year. We got some really great content coming on for you guys. So before we start, make sure that you subscribe to our YouTube channel, Everybody Eats Podcast. We have all our episodes, all our past episodes are on there. All our future episodes, they will be on there. So make sure that you're subscribing to our YouTube channel so you're staying up to date and all that. Also on all our social media, Instagram, everybodyeats.pod, Twitter, EBE pod. You want to make sure you're following us so you can be up to date on all our content, all our posts, videos, all that good stuff. You don't want to miss out. All right. So, on that note, today we have a really, really special episode. So normally we kind of have like a business twist, but today's episode is going to be a little bit more of a conversation. So a couple of weeks back, I had the pleasure of being on the Cultured Unplugged podcast YouTube show with Chris Rudder. He was also a former guest of ours on the podcast. So it was a great conversation with Chris and Brian. So I was like, dang, like we have to continue this on our podcast. So that's where we are now. So before we start, Chris and Brian, if you two can introduce yourselves. What do you guys do? Where are you guys from? So you give a little background, and then we could have that conversation started from there. So Chris, if you could go first.
Sure, Bensky, first of all, thank you for having me. It's a pleasure and an honor, and I'm very humbled to be here. Again, my name is Chris. I am the host of Cultured Unplugged, and I am really dedicated to helping young Black men thrive and succeed. And my full-time gig, I work as a small business consultant for a major bank. I'm from Brooklyn originally, Brooklyn stand up. I'm currently living in the DMV area. And so 2021 is really about the next chapter, and that's really giving back. So I'm truly happy to be here and be a part of this topic.
Sure, for sure. And Brian?
Hello, everyone. Always a pleasure to fellowship with like-minded individuals. Bensky, thanks for having me. Obviously, this is the second time I've done anything like this. So it's new for me, but it's nothing new about, fellowship with good people and basically, what I call like just a meeting of the mind. So a little bit about me. I'm actually born and raised in Eastern North Carolina, like close to the beach. From there, I moved to DC and then into Maryland. And now I'm in San Antonio, Texas. So I done moved all the way across the country, brought my family. I am a very proud Black man, first and foremost, but right after that and kind of right next to it, I'm a family man, devout husband, devout father. I work in the financial industry. That's actually where Chris and I met. And then also too, in my leisure, I do have my own personal training business. Very important for me to, help people achieve any goals they may have. Personal training is one of the mediums I do that through, but I'm really serious about people achieving their goals and their full potential in any capacity.
Perfect. So love to hear it, right? Love to see it. Definitely. It's a pleasure having you guys. So that's definitely some great perspective to have on today's episode. So to get right into it, right? So the purpose of this conversation is kind of talk about, what is masculinity, right? So I guess more specific, we could talk about Black masculinity, but I think masculinity as a whole, that's a lot to unravel. So if we could just start with how do you define it, right? So, right, let's get a definition there first, and then we'll open that conversation. So, how would you define, what is masculinity in your own sense? So, Brian, you could start off first with that.
Oh, I gotta start first. All right, okay. So, so Black masculinity. If I can narrow it down, I would say, what does manhood mean to me? Obviously, manhood means to me, obviously, through the realm of masculinity and through that lens of masculinity, it's kind of hard to look at it just in that sense, because obviously you can have very masculine traits, but you may not be a man. So obviously, Black masculinity to me is obviously embracing who I am as far as like how God put me on this planet. And whatever you believe is fine. Whatever you believe in is fine. Whether it's the universe, whether it's nature or whatever. I'm interested in fully achieving how God put me on this planet. Obviously, that was a son first. Now I'm a husband. Whatever part of my family first, my community, however I can be an integral part in those aspects and fully achieve those goals. And I'm talking about a positive aspect, whether it be from a nurturing standpoint of providing, producing, making sure that other people know how to provide and produce also. The nurturing side of masculinity. I know a lot of people don't think of masculinity as nurturing, but it is in the purest sense of it. That's the definition, a part of the definition for me. Also, masculinity is also being that counterpart in the universe to feminine energy. Obviously we all carry masculine and feminine energy. And obviously, I'm part of that yin to the yang, so to speak. Obviously there's a negative connotations to some attributes of masculinity, depending on how you use it, how it is, how it's conducted, just like electricity. Obviously the choice to use masculinity in a productive way, that's when you start achieving manhood. So that kind of, it's hard to just put it in one definition, but that's what it means to me.
Got it. Definitely understood. And Chris?
So I have to go back a little further and a little deeper because, it goes back to historical sense, whereas when you think of Black masculinity in relates to America, you have to think about it as a devalued culture. It's a devalued existence, and years of having to prove ourselves as not only men, but as Black men. And when I think about character and I think about who we are as far as identity, those things relate very well to what Black masculinity really is. And so I think about leaders in our history going way back that we can relate back to. Maybe, you look at Thurgood Marshall, you can look back at Medgar Evers, you can look at, these are, prime leaders that were for civil rights. And it goes so deep, especially in American history, of us always having to say, look, I am a man. And I'm a Black man and I deserve these rights and I deserve to feel that I have value, I have substance. And it's so sick because I've seen, the historical things and going back into the slavery times, obviously, where you had the European culture that were doing everything they can to feminize Black men and to make them feel, to break them down, to separate them obviously from the woman and whatnot. And those things run deep. Those experiences, that history, that nasty, that evil and dark history is so deeply seated within us that we almost have to, break the barrier, and we have to kind of go against the grain. And it's just so much things to go with it. I mean, I kind of feel like I'm going in right now early, but I feel that, from experiences, and I feel that through culture, and I feel that through neighborhoods that people, a lot of us are lost, man. A lot of us are misguided. A lot of us are on the right track. And I think it comes back to a lot of disparities and a lot of feeling of being devalued.
Understood. I want to hear your piece since you were on the YouTube channel. So I want to hear your piece of you. How do you define it?
So my definition is going to be pretty basic based on my personal experiences. I just feel masculinity in and of itself is just overall being like everybody usually says, protector, provider, and like Brian said, the counterpart to the feminine energy. And in my personal life, I think it's just being there for your family and those around you, just being a positive influence, passing on positive lessons, and just being there to reinforce it. You know, like kids grow up loving their mothers more for the most part, or that's what we're told, right? And in my case, that's true. So to me, masculinity is just being there and letting my kids know, and even my family know, that, hey, I'm also a shoulder to cry on. You know, you don't have to always go to your mother or my sister, your aunt, or anyone else. You can also come to me. You know, I'm going to give you the same response. You know, if we can both sit here and cry together, I can sit here and just listen. You know, I don't have to give you advice. I can simply listen and just be a source of wisdom for you. So that's my definition.
For sure. So that would be a somewhat definition for myself. I think, you know, for me, it kind of goes back, you know, looking back on like how my father taught it, like accountability. I like that word nurturing. I like hearing that a lot because I feel like, again, that's not really a word that you kind of, or maybe you don't normally associate masculinity with, you know, nurturing. Again, like I kind of like what Edom said, that's something you normally think about, like growing up, like crying on your mom, you know, or crying to your mom, like that's more of that nurturing spirit. But I think that's a part of masculinity, right? That's a part of, to me, I think a lot of it comes back to just being responsible, right? If you're going to be, you know, either like a father, husband, like you're supposed to be taking care of your significant other. You're supposed to be taking care of your family. You're supposed to be taking care of, if it's, you know, your other siblings, like you're supposed to have that nurturing aspect. So I definitely like that word. So I think for me, it comes down to being that nurturing figure, being accountable, being responsible, being that like provider. And I feel like sometimes, you know, those words, you know, being a provider, being, you know, maybe being a head of the household, a lot of those, sometimes those kind of come off as like, I don't want to say negative, but sometimes they kind of have like a negative connotation to them a little bit, because maybe it feels like, oh, you're kind of in that either macho position, you know, but I feel like that kind of goes back to responsibility. And I don't think there's anything wrong with responsibility. There's nothing wrong with being responsible, you know, for your family. There's nothing wrong with, you know, like, you know, what people like to say, like, you know, the buck kind of stops with you, right? If you're a father figure, or, you know, I don't see anything wrong with that. If you abuse your power or you abuse that position, then I think that's when we start getting into, you know, toxic masculinity, or when we start having, you know, that negative connotation. But I don't think there's anything wrong with it in and of itself, as long as you're doing your part and you're not, like I said, like abusing that power, you know, thinking like, oh, I'm the head of the household, or I'm a man, you know, I order people around, or you can't do this to me, or I expect, you know, dinner being ready at this and this time when I come home, or like I'm gonna start yelling, you know what I'm saying? Like once you start getting to that, then I think, you know, you lost it, right? But I think in and of itself, in quote unquote, like its purest form, like I think all those responsibilities and stuff like is a real positive light. And you know, I don't see anything wrong with that. So I guess like my next question would be, I guess it's kind of loaded. Like, I want to say, where does that come from? But, you know, I guess like why do you think, or what do you guys take on like why a lot of those, you know, points of masculinity kind of come off as like a negative, right? Like, why don't we necessarily see nurturing or think of nurturing, you know, as like a masculine trait? Or like, why don't we see that quote unquote shoulder to cry on as like a masculine trait? You know, like what would you guys take, or what would you be your guys' opinion on why that is?
If I could start that off real quick. So my thing is, again, we kind of go back into the word like culture, and it's always, in my opinion, we always been made to feel like you can't necessarily show emotion. You can't, as a man, especially as a Black man, you can't be able to have that nurturing piece, because it may show you to be, you know, have feminine ways, or it may show you to be a little soft or whatnot. And I think that's a big misconception, because if anything, it's actually quite the opposite, you know, being able to express yourself. But we lean on a couple of things too. And I kind of give it to historical factors. When I go back to, and quote me on the dates, I know Brian will probably be able to quote me on this one if I'm wrong here, but we go back to the age of Lyndon B. Johnson, I believe, you know, around the 60s, when, you know, they were breaking the families out of the households. There were, you know, the separation of the men, the Black men, out of the homes, and the women were dependent on, welfare, instituting that whole program. And so once all that stuff started to really be in place, or is it either Joe Ford, one of the two, but one of those things came into place, it changed the dynamic. It started to come up with this culture, of men where you seen a shift. You seen Black men, obviously they're quote unquote not being there for their kids, not being a provider in the household. So all that big dramatic shift, I'd love to touch more into that just so I'll have a better understanding if I'm wrong on that one. But I really believe that's the historical factor comes from that. And it led to this generations of us that are, quote unquote, hey, we can't have this motion. We're out of the household. We're doing what we want. We're being quote unquote lazy. We don't do anything. And I think that's a big misconception. Brian, what do you think about that? 'Cause I feel like I lost the translation from that one, but I feel like
no. I think you were actually like right on point. Like, because like, obviously the question that Bensky asked, people have like short-term memories. We all do. I feel like we don't really have a long-term memory. We just have a short-term memory. And, all of us can probably attest, the more and more history we learn, like real history about ourselves and where we come from, it's a reoccurring thing. We're living out a reality that really we didn't design, or we're not the authors of the culture that we kind of adopted. So it's kind of hard to define what's a negative and positive connotation about masculinity or femininity, when I think a lot of the times when we kind of come up against a wall, or we hit a brick wall, or we don't know why we're at each other's throats, or we don't know why that, you got these men go their own way groups, and then you have these like fanatical feminist groups. Because some of the feminist groups are great, but I'm talking about the fanatical groups that are just like basically separatist groups. Why do we have this we want to throw each other away culture right now? It's because a lot of us really don't really feel the need to go all the way back to the beginning of, is it even our culture? I'm really big on like the universe and how it works. And when you're not living out your true place in the universe, you're always going to have resistance. And when you talk about like in the 70s, at the end of the industrial age, when, Black families, 70% were married. You know what I mean? Like 70% of Black families had that nucleus. Now, I'm not saying it was all peachy cream and it was all happy marriages, but that's a big deal. You know what I mean? Like when you go from 70% in 1971, I think it's like 1976, it was down to like 25%. That number doesn't lie. You know what I mean? So that devaluing and the negative connotations that come with some aspects of masculinity, it stems from a lot of that. And Chris, you were completely on point. It's like it all comes down to a devaluing, not seeing value in what masculinity or what manhood can be or what womanhood can be. And it comes back to the reverse is true too. It comes back to if I don't even know how to value you, how am I going to see value? You know what I mean? If I've always seen you through the prism of the culture that we live in as a lesser than or a subservient, or you can't be emotional, you can't do this, you can't cry. You know what I mean? Like, grown men can't hug. It's like, it's all this, like, was just so pent up because we have these weird connotations that we're going off of, and we have no idea where we start, where we begin. You know what I mean? So I totally agree with what you were saying, Chris. It was on point.
Appreciate it.
Definitely. So go ahead, Edom.
Yeah. So I really love, like, when I first heard on Chris's podcast, Brian say we're not the authors of it. I think that is the answer to so many questions in regards to masculinity, Black masculinity, and just Black culture in of itself. Because I think I meant to add this to my definition of masculinity, specifically Black masculinity. We need to undo and weed out these behaviors and ideas and concepts that we learned from white people. Back to the time when we were slaves and slavery was abolished and all that stuff. You take these people from their countries and they're here on this shore. They don't know how things work, so they're going to look to their former slaves, slave masters, and all that stuff. You hear some people even stayed with them because they had got nothing else, and so that just it sticks. It sticks. It definitely sticks, and it gets carried on. So that's why you get this rhetoric of black men then taking what they've seen in white households and going to apply that in their own households when they have a family and their kids and all that stuff. All that whether it be, I guess, pent up aggression or anger and stuff. It just gets perpetuated. And in order to, I feel, really find our own definition and idea of Black masculinity, we need to weed out those behaviors and realize that I don't think Black men are oppressors, but yes, we can what's the word? Enact, I guess, oppressive behaviors, right? So I think to find a proper definition and get rid of all these negative connotations, that's part of it.
I was going to say too, and I like how Eden brought this up as far as, we look at European culture as a means to, kind of bring the table to us, or be at their table. They have an award show. We feel like we have to, we find value in their award ceremonies. If they have, there's some type of recognition, we want to be recognized by them, or we don't find value in what we do based on what we have and we built to be just as good to our white counterparts. And that's something that I find that's always been historically the case. And so now it's almost ingrained, and you look at it, in fashion and entertainment, and even vehicles, all these different type of things we look to and we value, hold so much weight on. We when we come up with something by ourselves, I'm like, oh, that's going to be, $10 less. That's 50% less. It's not nowhere near greater than a Prada or a Louis or something like that. I know I'm kind of not taking off track here, but I'm just going based on instead of us, waiting for them to kind of recognize us and see us, and we have to really find value, get back to this point of finding value within ourselves and being able to say, hey, it's enough to be recognized by, XYZ, us, one of us, whatnot. That's where I think that we also got to get back to.
For sure. So not to stray away from that point, but something that Eden mentioned, kind of like post-slavery, kind of made me think of, I don't know if any of you guys had a chance to visit the African American Museum in DC. But
Not yet.
Yeah, for sure. So it's definitely beautiful. But I believe there's a section in that museum that kind of goes over like the history of like minstrel shows, kind of kind of happened, or that became very popular late 1800s, early 1900s. And a lot of that, thinking about that is how they perpetuated like male stereotypes, right? And how, the hypersexualized Black man, right? The aggressive Black man, the one preying on the white woman, you know what I'm saying? Yep. Like a lot of those shows, that's what they would show, right? People dressing up in whiteface, and there's always the Black man acting crazy, acting the fool. And I think, unfortunately, one, that plays into like stereotypes in the media, right? That plays into like, oh, like how do we view the Black man? Hypersexualized, thug, gangster, this, that, and the third. So one, and I think, once that plays out in the media, whether you're Black or white, if you see that all the time, like obviously that's where it started. We don't really see too many minstrel shows today, but like if you talk about like where it comes from, right? If you're seeing that all the time, whoever you are, you're seeing that in the media, that's a lot of that is going to go into your subconscious bias. And I think if you're, maybe if you're white or, whatever race, and you see that subconsciously, that's where you're going to start thinking that's what Black men are. That's what Black men do, right? And unfortunately, if you're Black and you see that also in the media, you might start to think maybe, quote unquote, that's who I am, right? That's what Black men are, even if you're Black yourself. If you don't know better, if you haven't been taught better, you know what I'm saying? Or, if you start feeding into the stereotypes, you know what I'm saying? That's where, eventually once it starts to get into the community and it spreads, it's clipped. You know what I'm saying? Like that's where I think that's where, a good amount of it could spread in the media. Then also, that kind of goes back to what Chris was saying earlier about, separation of the Black family. In one of those, in that YouTube video, that went out, they kind of spoke about like how during the civil rights era, one, they were saying how the civil rights era, a lot of it was embodied in the church, and then also what made up the church was a lot of Black families. You know what I'm saying? So like that kind of like showed the importance of the Black family, having that nuclear family. Once you start going into the crack era, Black men taken out of the families getting separated. Again, that's going to, start perpetuating new stereotypes, drug dealer stereotypes, poor stereotypes. Black men aren't there in their family stereotypes. So I think, right, if you're white and you see that, right, that's where your stereotypes and your subconscious bias, like, oh, that's what a Black man is. And unfortunately, if you're in that community, you grow up in that community, or you're Black yourself, you may start thinking about you may start thinking that about yourself as well. And I think that also ties back into valuing yourself, right? Because if you grow up in an environment saying this is what Black men are, this is how I'm supposed to be, maybe, right? If all you see is in the media, it's like Black men doing this, that, and the third, crimes, drugs, whatever, then you might think to yourself, oh, that's all I am, right? Maybe that's what I'm destined to do. I'm this Black man. You know what I'm saying? Unfortunately, and that could have negative impacts on how you view yourself. That could be, how you treat your fellow brother, and then generational on how you raise your kids. So I think that kind of stems in, like you said, valuing yourself. Once you start seeing a better purpose, start kind of going back to where you said, like, once you start seeing a better purpose for yourself, how you're supposed to act, then it's easier to target certain behaviors or target certain stereotypes and be like, hey, like, even though that may be in the media, that's not how we all act. Even though that's maybe in the media, that's not how we all are. You may see that in the street or in your neighborhood, and be like, yo, that's, a behavior that's not good, or I shouldn't be acting like that. I shouldn't be passing that on. So I think that's kind of stems in from a lot of it, where it comes from, Black masculinity and Black stereotypes, where that comes from historically. And then unfortunately, it comes back to valuing ourselves and, how we act out and pass it on to other people.
Hey, Bensky, so all the fellas, first of all, I totally agree with all you guys. So I'm going to share a quote, and you guys have probably heard this. It's from Neely Fuller. He said, if you do not understand white supremacy, everything else will confuse you. Have you guys ever heard that?
I think I've heard variations of it.
Yeah,
so,
but not that.
So what that means is this. So, and I'm real big on calling stuff what it is. And this is not making excuses, but Bensky, what you just touched on, you literally broke down one of the major components and aspects of how white supremacy works. Black men we've been victims of one of the biggest, perpetuations of projection in human history. You literally said, like, how we chase our tails with, I think this is how I'm supposed to be, but I'm not sure. It's a reason for that. A powerful force, you can't get on a train track and stop a train. You got to either redirect the train or get off the track. When you think of masculinity, obviously they'll show you Bruce Willis or Arnold Schwarzenegger on TV, but when people are out in just normal social settings, when you see a powerful Black man, you just know. This is period. You know what I mean? So, obviously the Black man has always been at the apex of what most people generalize and think of as masculinity. And that's something that goes back to slavery. And so, again, you got that train's coming down the track. You enslaved all these men. We weren't all just like going along to get along. A lot of us were slaughtered because we chose to resist. A lot of us were raped. A lot of us were killed. You know what I mean? It's a reason why our women outnumber us by so much. And it ain't just because we're in jail. You know what I mean? So how you broke that down was so on point, man, because you basically talk about what really happened to us. But it didn't just happen. It was deliberate. Obviously those media campaigns and those minstrel shows, that was for us. A lot of people think it was for everybody else to be scared of us. No, it was for us to not really fully achieve who we were and to hang our heads, be ashamed of who we were, and basically not fully achieve our masculinity because we were taught to be ashamed of it because we thought, yeah, but I'm an abuser. I'm this. I'm not a nurturer. I can't cry. You know what I mean? And then along the way, along the way with how white supremacy works is I'm going to also infuse in them that they're not supposed to fight back, that they're not supposed to speak up, that they're basically supposed to argue with their women rather than be accountable, control their emotions, and figure things out with their women, their mothers, their daughters, their sisters and their wives. So you just broke down something that's full circle. That's a campaign. It's not something that just happens. That's something that's very, very deliberate to put in our minds first. Those media campaigns are for us. That's what people don't realize. Yeah, it makes everybody scared of us, but we're the first ones that are like supposed to be scared. You know what I mean? Not to like, kind of, go in on somebody, but I use Terry Crews as an example. Yeah. I love Terry Crews. Yeah. Great movies, great guy. But when some of the stuff that he says, how powerful this man is and how subservient some of the things he says that are so disrespectful to Black culture, that's an ultimate example of that. Looking at him, it's silly because the white guy's like, man, this dude could like fold me in half. He could say whatever he wants to say. But in his mind, he feels like he had to play this role to fit into a certain system. You know what I mean? So I appreciate you saying that.
I think it's commercialized. That's another thing too. You get a certain type of level. It seems as though that seems to be a running theme for a lot of men, especially Black men who are in power and some sort of power. They don't. They almost have to downgrade themselves. One of the things that came out, like when Nick Cannon said, he was talking about, Black people are the real Israelites, are the true Israelites, and he brought that to light. They automatically canceled him. They automatically restrained him and put him under, and then and that's like a thing that's happened recently. Like if you speak against something that, or you speak truth in some ideology, you're ultimately the enemy. And so I think that's a really jacked up situation. But we have to understand that, just like how Brian, you were talking about Terry Crews, that stuff still goes on, and it's almost like in hidden messaging subliminally, with, the commercials, watching TV shows. I think you and I, Brian, we had a conversation about, when we're looking at HBO, we're looking at certain type of shows. Like, you ever seen that show? Oh gosh, what is it called? It's called The Watchmen. And
I've seen it. Yeah.
In the Watchmen, the guy who was, I guess, the Black guy who, I think it was like the father, something like that, back in the 50s, they kind of showed you the whole talk and everything like that. And he was, a white dude was messing around with him. And so it's like, what is those themes? Like, what are the meanings of that? And I kind of started to question it ever since, you and I, Brian, we talked about it, was why is Hollywood painting certain kind of pictures and based on our culture? And so I think that threw me off.
It's Chris, it's very it's weird because you can't sully the conversation, because obviously, real men, we're going to respect people no matter what their lifestyle, no matter what their place is. So, but when you bring things up, it's weird. Like, everyone wants to throw everything in the same bag. You know what I mean? No, I'm not talking about, every culture, every gender, every type of lifestyle being respected and displayed on TV. I'm talking about certain messages that are more prevalent than others. And it's like you're asking questions. You know what I mean? Asking questions is fine. When you make determinations and make judgments, that's where it's the wrong thing. But asking questions should be fine, but we can't even ask the questions. You know what I mean? Or you mentioned Nick Cannon. Nick Cannon couldn't even stand on what he said, whether it was right or wrong. But a white man can be wrong as strong and wrong, but they're going to stand on it. And not only are they going to stand on it, but they're going to get backed up by this person, this person, this person, this person. But, obviously, even if we speak truth or whatever, obviously we have to be broken down because, you can't let that fester. That's one of those stay in your place type things. You know what I mean? So
I want to you guys brought up so many points. I have a note on my phone right next to me full of a lot of things that I don't know what to pick at first, but I'm going to go back to your episode you guys did. Brian, you mentioned the statistic about Black fathers being in the home. The percentage, I forgot, but you said it was pretty close as compared, I think, to any other ethnic
group, right? It's actually higher or right on par. And this was done as of 2017. Now we're not in relationships. That's a problem. See, that's the problem. But you can pick and choose stats and say and basically push whatever your agenda is. It's easy to say that Black fathers aren't in the home, but we are in the home with our children. We are in our children's lives. We may not be in the home, but nobody's in relationships anymore. But of course, it's easy to say, You know what I mean? Like it's how you can flip statistics to make a point or push a certain agenda. You know what I mean?
And I think that's also the issue. I think it also falls in the bucket of we're not the authors of it. That just falls with the issue that statistics and black men were just used I mean, not to really quote the video, but to push a political agenda or push or further it. And when you mentioned that statistic, I asked myself, I was shocked. And then, you know, I had to take a step back and wonder why I was shocked, you know, like why should this surprise me? Because I do know, you know, thinking back, you look back, I do know a lot of black men my age with fathers in their house, you know, regardless of their, you know, whatever goes on behind closed doors, they're in the house, you know. Yeah. So that to me bothered me. And I think that just goes to show with everybody else, just this subculture of violence that's portrayed in the media of black men. You know, we're seen as savages and violent people, you know, from very young ages. And it just makes it harder or like you said, it's easy for us to keep our heads down. You know, I think Bensky and I, we talk about this all the time. When you see stories of black men committing a crime or whatever, and it's on something like CNN, and that gets broadcasted globally, you know, you're my parents, I'm Nigerian, so, you know, they have CNN on all the time, no matter what, you know, and you see that and you come here and you're told, hey, be careful outside, you know, you're a black man, you know, I never questioned it, you know, at a point it was like, all right, mom, you know, that's fine. But then you really have to just sit and just sit on it. I feel like a lot of people just don't ask that second question of why. They just accept it as it is. And that just goes that follows your point of these statistics being flipped or portrayed favorably against black men. And a lot of it is statistics, and other stuff is just, you know, unfounded facts, because there's no real study for black men. There's nobody, like, you know, giving numbers about this. Someone will just say just some broad statement or generalization about black men, and it gets published, and then, like you said, backed, you know, especially in the age of social media. It just gets backed. False information gets put out. There's some pages, you know, I see on social media, like Embracing Black Culture. You know, I think that page is full of crap a lot of the time. It's full of crap. If you really like look at the posts and the things they post, I just feel like it's very minute, but it's real, like, dividing at the same time. I'm not going to, you know, really get into it, but, you know, do the research and look at it for yourselves and think back to what we're talking about. It's a lot of just like trigger words that people use and say, like when you listen to you know, politicians like Trump speak, you know, he always associates China and foreign countries with adversaries, or, you know, threat, some form of like a threatening word. And, you know, you buy into that. If you keep listening, if you keep reading that, and you just see like, you just associate these actions or pictures with negative things, and you see a black male at the picture of it, or you see a black woman associated with something positive. You kind of just keep that going, and then people, you know, they then just, especially after, you know, this summer, a lot of people on my feed have been putting on their social justice warrior hats, and I think a lot of them need to take that off, because they're not doing their research. They're just like taking whatever they see and then putting it on their platform and spreading misinformation. And it just, it continues to, and they don't realize it themselves. It continues to perpetuate that negative stereotype. And they think they're doing a service. And if, you know, try to go and call them out on it, you're met with a lot of pushback. Like you said, like Nick Cannon, he got silenced, you know, lost Wild 'N Out, something he came out with, you know, like, it's just, to me, it's just mind blowing that we can't, you know, what do you like celebrate ourselves without being met with, but, you know, or don't forget y'all did blah, blah, blah. You know, it's just, it's mind blowing to me, and no one really questions it, you know? So that's why, like, a perfect example of this is, we all saw that video I sent out, and surprisingly enough, one of my friends who did not see the video, I know he didn't see it, he posted something exactly like that. He's talked about, he brought up statistics and and a bunch of numbers. And the sad part was he put that on his close friends and not on his regular feed. So it just goes to show that I feel like if he had posted that on his regular feed, he would have been met with a lot of anger and ire from, whether it be, black women or white women, or, it doesn't matter who. I feel like he would have, there's a reason he felt the need to put that on his close friends. And even building off that, I posted that tweet from the video, which was, you can't be pro-black and hate straight black men. I was met with, it was one person, but this person just felt the need to argue with me. Always one. And earlier in preparation for our discussion, I posted on my Instagram a bunch of questions about whether toxic masculinity exists. It was, what was it? Does toxic masculinity really exist? And then I asked everybody why, right? And a lot of the answers and responses I saw were just very inconsistent, and it was just very like, it was just like they weren't describing anything. They were using the words manhood and masculinity to describe toxic masculinity. And I'm like, what is this? It doesn't mean anything. And I'm just so lost because it's all these negative traits and stuff that people have just associated with masculinity. But to be honest, these can be perpetrated by both genders, both sex. Doesn't matter what sexual orientation you are. You can do this. You can be homophobic. You could be a man or a woman and homophobic. You could be violent. Somebody said not listening to women is part of that. Who says only a man cannot listen? Who says only a man can perpetrate these behaviors? It makes no sense to me. And I was called ignorant and stupid and a misogynist and sexist for fighting against all of this. So, I mean, to me, it just blows my mind that all these points and facts are just literally being proven.
Half these people don't even know the definition of these words.
They don't. So they're just throwing it out.
Yeah.
Nah, so that actually kind of goes into the next point. I kind of want to say toxic masculinity for the second segment.
My bad.
No, it's definitely a good point. So let's do this. Let's go into the quote of the day, and then let's save the last segment for we can go over toxic masculinity, and then after that, we're going to talk about some solutions. So we want to always end on a positive note and be solution minded. So I think we did a good job covering a lot of where this comes from and a lot of the issues of it. So then again, we'll do toxic masculinity and then talk about some solutions for black men in the black community. So Edom, when you are ready, we can switch over to do that quote of the day from there.
Okay.
Yep.
Okay. All right. So start off, you guys aren't going to guess who said this because it's from an anime I was watching, but we could definitely talk about it. So the quote is, "He who climbs the ladder must first begin at the bottom."
Okay.
So me personally, I think I literally imagine the ladder, but the ladder to me means a lot of things, and especially in the sense of this conversation, breaking down the nasty rhetoric of masculinity and black masculinity, or even black people to begin with. You have to start somewhere. It's people still talk. People use stairs as an example usually more, but it's the same thing. You have to start at the bottom. And ladders are big. They're, for the most part, I think they're bigger than stairs, but it's not easy, and it's scary. I think ladders are definitely very scary to climb, especially if they're all the way flat up against something. That to me is very scary, but you have to start somewhere. You have to start at the bottom. You can't start at the middle. You can't, I mean, unless you're an expert ladder climber, you can't really skip a rung effectively. You have to start at the bottom and work your way up.
I think the ladder is symbolic. It's definitely symbolic to whatever you're putting effort into, whatever you're putting, energy into. And so if it's something that you're looking to achieve, if it's something that having understanding, like some of the basic things is having understanding of yourself, your one self, having understanding of the people that are around you, your culture. If you're able to grasp that, if you can get down to the very bottom, at the very root of it, of your existence on this earth and what it really means to even be here in the first place, then you can fundamentally have an idea where you're going. You know, to have understanding of your being, your history, and the social makeup of yourself or who around you, then you can be able to say, okay, as the ladder, so to speak, right? You're looking up, then you have a place to kind of put energy and focus into to really be able to overcome it or able to get to the top.
For sure. For me, I guess the first thing that kind of came to my head was like started from the bottom, now we here, right? And then also kind of going back to now but lifting as we climb mentality. No one has all the answers in the beginning, right? So like no one starts off knowing all the answers, right? So you have to start kind of like you said, like you kind of start from somewhere. You have to have a foundation. Kind of have a foundational knowledge. If you're pursuing something, you have to have a good base. You have to start from the bottom, and then from there, you scale up, right? And then that also kind of ties back into, the lifting as you climb mentality, where, just being able to, as you're going up, being able to help somebody, who's doing the same thing, and like the first thing like right now that kind of comes to my head is like Chris and I, like, I know, just like asking questions about simple like podcast stuff, right? Like when you hit me up like, oh, like how'd you do this? Or like just now before we started this video, like, yo, how do you, make everyone's, the camera speak up? Like little things like that is just giving back and helping each other like move up. You know what I'm saying? So that's like the first thing that kind of came to my head is like, you got to have either foundational knowledge before you go, before you start any venture, business, whatever. You have to start the foundational knowledge before you go up. And then while you are going up, just always lifting as you climb. That's just something that's always in my head. You have to look back and help people behind you.
Well, for me, guys, so the first thing I thought about is that ladder is definitely in the basement. If you guys catch where I'm going with that. Yeah. So that ladder is definitely, it's not going upstairs. We in the basement. You know what I mean? We in the bottom floor right now. And in reference to this Black masculinity discussion, starting at the bottom, for me, it basically, obviously, in a lot of the research and things that I've noticed is, the people that I embody as heroes, they always come back to one common theme of knowing where you began, but they also say, don't leave behind the things you want to leave behind. Just like I can say the statistic about Black fathers being there for their children, we have to have a code of conduct. And this is the true definition of masculinity. When it comes to accountability, we have to have a code of conduct where we can say one stat that shows how amazing we are, but we also got to figure out why we having so many domestic homicides, why we killing our women. You know what I mean? Why that number is so high. Why the numbers are so high with molestation and incest within our Black communities. There's a lot of things that I feel like we're so wrapped up in either subservience or self-guilt that we won't just like stand on it. But we got to stand on the good and the bad. And if we have that code of conduct, when we embrace the underbelly and the worst parts of our culture and our society and how, our other males carry things out, we'll also be able to really tell people, no, this is how great we are. This is what we accomplished. Give us all of our music back. Like we'll be able to really claim those things once we embrace all of it. But we can't just tell half the story, because that's what we're victims of, being told an abbreviated portion of our story now. You know what I mean? By another group of people. So we can't adopt that mentality of that whitewash mentality and tell only half of the story of what's going on with us right now. We got to figure, and that's how we're going to figure out why we do certain things. Those behaviors that they always try to hang on us, a lot of times there's some truth behind those negative behaviors. We got to be able to define it ourselves, though. I'm not going to let you define it. We already got it covered. We're going to clean up, what's in our house before we come on the front porch. You know what I mean? But we got to know how ugly it is and how beautiful it is. That's very important, I think, because a lot of times when you think about Black empowerment, everyone always talks about music and the good things, but a big thing about how you empower yourself is knowing where you're your weakest, where you've fallen way, way short. You know what I mean? That's masculinity. like really falling on the sword and saying, yeah, man, I'm really, we so to speak, we fucked up. You know what I mean? This is where we really got to clean things up. But we have to be the ones to say that. We can't let somebody else dictate that for us. And that's the problem. We letting other people dictate the pace for Black men. And meanwhile, we're seen as the most masculine, but we don't act that way. You know what I mean? Like we know the case. Like we'll shoot each other, but we'll let a white cop beat our mom right in front of us. And I'm not saying that we need to start going on a killing spree, but think about how insane that would be if that was a white guy. You know what I mean? We need to like really look at the stories that we're given. As amazing as John Lewis is, if John Lewis was white, they wouldn't celebrate him. Who's the white John Lewis hero that they celebrate? They only celebrate people that are what they consider the true essence of power, dominating people, retaliation, and, taking advantage of weak people. You know what I mean? But they don't really allow us to truly achieve that. We just need to say what it is, not other people. And a big part of embracing the negative parts of our culture that we're responsible for is a big one that we got to really embrace for us to embrace how great we are too. So that's what the latter kind of, signifies for me.
Nah, definitely. So I kind of want to build off of that last segment and kind of use that to go into that last piece that you just said and use that to go into our last segment. I kind of wanted this to...
Should I repeat the quote first before you get into that? All right.
Repeat the quote before we end this and then we'll move on. Okay,
so one more time. The quote is, "He who climbs the ladder must first begin at the bottom."
For sure. So building off of the last thing that Brian said, I want to kind of speak about, a little bit of toxic masculinity, but I don't want to go down that rabbit hole because we go on that all night. But I think the most important piece of toxic masculinity is kind of like we said, is accountability for both the good and the bad, right? So that could be masculinity and that could just be, issues in the Black community as well. So kind of like wrapping that up into one. That's a part, of being masculine or just being a good human in general, is that you have to be accountable for your actions. No one's perfect. So we have to admit and we have to recognize we do have some really good qualities and really good traits that people don't recognize. And we also do have some, bad traits that we have to acknowledge and look internally and be like, hey, this is not a good trait or this is not a good, characteristic, so to speak. We have to fix that, or I have to fix that, if you're talking about an individual. That kind of makes me think about when people kind of bring up what about Black on Black crime? You know what I'm saying? And it's not to say that Black on Black crime doesn't exist. It's not to, try and denounce Black on Black crime in the community. But kind of like you said, it's kind of like, to me, the way I see Black on Black crime, that's a Black community issue that we have to first acknowledge, and then we have to fix ourselves. Don't let outside communities, dictate and start telling us what about Black on Black crime and those Black issues.
And really, does it exist? Does it? Does Black on Black crime really exist? That's a big thing.
To me, Black on Black crime. All right, when people say, well, "What about Black on Black crime?" To me, it's just crime. You know what I'm saying? Because
exactly.
A lot of times, it's not like Black on. I don't mean Black on Black crime in a racial sense. Like when a brother kills another brother for some J's or for some other BS, and it's not because of your skin tone. It's just crime in the community. You know what I'm saying? So that's what I mean by Black on Black crime.
Oh, I'm being facetious. I agree with that. I agree with you. I just want the listeners to know, people kill who they're next to. Nobody from bumfuck Ohio is driving all the way to DC to kill Black people. People kill who they're next to.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? So
exactly. So
I'm agreeing with you.
That's an issue within the Black community, right? If you want to label it just crime, Black on Black crime, that's just an issue in the Black community ourselves that we have to be like, yo, we definitely have to do better. You know what I'm saying? We had a couple episodes ago, we had our brother Maxwell Ampadu. He was selling, he sells sneakers. And he was saying how he got shot because he was selling a pair of sneakers. Dude ran up on him, you know what I'm saying? And thankfully he survived. I think he said the bullet, got almost punctured his lung. But that shouldn't be happening. You know what I'm saying? That stupid stuff shouldn't be happening. You know what I'm saying? But, in order for us to advance, we have to look at those, we have to look at those faults either within us as an individual, maybe as a community, if you want to be more broad. And that's how we say all right, we need to stop this action, clean it, and then move forward. You know what I'm saying? So at the same time, it's, we have to be responsible. We have to be accountable for our own actions, the good and the bad. So if no one else has any points,
sorry, wait, I want to add to accountability just a little bit. Oftentimes I feel like, that's my word for 2021, that and intentionality. There's so much lack of accountability everywhere. I feel like a lot of things get pushed to one party, especially because I feel like in situations where accountability matters, there's always two sides. So one side is always getting the blame, I feel. And really, in order to move on and carry on, one like both parties need to swallow their pride, and it to a degree they have to admit they're wrong and come together in some form of the middle and admit, hey, I played a role in this and I played a role in so I'm going to associate it with masculinity and toxic masculinity. So like I said earlier, I did a poll talking about toxic masculinity and what masculinity is, and I forgot what response triggered this. So I think someone said, sorry, I'm trying to find it right now. The idea of being a man is often shaped by media and pop culture and isn't always healthy. And he also added something else. But my response to that was someone said mothers play a role in it as well. And I said, oftentimes when a child is raised well, you kind of give credit more to the mother, right? And when that's my opinion, so sorry if nobody agrees, but oftentimes when a child is raised well, you often give credit to the mother, and when he's raised wrong, you look to the father, or you look to the lack of a father, so I just think there's even in that statement, or that idea, or people who do that kind of, you're not holding yourself accountable, because I know people with 2-parent households and their child's a piece of shit, and it's just like they have both parents in the house. So who are you blaming there? And both are in their lives. Both of I've seen them both pop out at events, school events, and this, that, and the third. So who are you holding accountable? Who are you blaming? And I think you should look to both parties, no matter what. Because at the end of the day, like, I don't think anyone is personally holding a gun to your head to perpetuate these ideas. So another example is my mom. She's from Nigeria. Both my parents are immigrants from Nigeria. And my mom has some ideals. So I have long hair. It's not really traditional or whatever. And my sister had cut her hair short. So my dad went and said, "Oh, my sons want to be girls, and my daughter wants to be a boy." Right? Haha. It was funny. I laughed because I thought it was funny. But, even past that, my mom every day is talking about, cutting my hair. It doesn't look good. It's feminine. And, where was I going with this? I lost my train of thought briefly. But outside of that, even with my sister, she's always trying to force her to cook and this, that, and the third. And yes, I know, in foreign households or I guess foreign countries, these ideas of gender roles are very strict, and there's no fluidity as much as there is in the United States. But I think, especially coming from your country to the United States, you have to hold. I think you have to hold both parties accountable, because no one is forcing my mom to keep these ideas up. No one's holding a gun to her head and saying, "Hey, if you don't tell your son to cut his hair, I'm gonna, hurt you or do this, that, and the third." I think like people are capable of their own thought, in this sense, in this specific example, people are capable of their own thought. And my mom is stuck in her ways from what she grew up with. And you can't say there's no room to change, because people can change. So it's my thought. Sorry if it got lost anywhere, but
I definitely heard that, that point before. And I think it kind of just goes back to, like you said, just like holding both, like you said, holding both parties accountable. It's not just a one-sided, only, men perpetuate this or women perpetuate that. Like, both parties are capable of doing both good and bad, you know what I'm saying? Like, or both our parties are capable of, you know, maybe perpetuating certain stereotypes. It's not just, you know, one or the other, you know what I'm saying? At the end of the day, like you said, it comes down to how you believe and how you do it yourself, you know what I'm saying? So you can't be making these grand, you know, statements, big blanket statements, all men do this, all women do that, or something like that. Like, at the end of the day, it comes down to, you know, that individual, kind of like in that YouTube video, you know, like if you had a bad individual experience with a black man or a bad individual experience with a black woman, that doesn't give you the right, like, you need to go seek help or counseling for your situation. That doesn't give you the right to go and blame, oh, all black men are trash, all black women are this, you know what I'm saying? Like, no, go fix your own situation before you start blaming, you know, the whole next party.
Generalizing whole race of people, you know, like, you can't do that.
Exactly. So I think, you know, that kind of leads to the last point. We always want to end on a positive note. We want to be solution minded, right? So we spoke about a lot today. We covered a lot where, you know, this theme of masculinity came from, how it's affected our families, toxic masculinity, how it's affected each other, how it affects our communities. So obviously not one person has the answer, but I want to start thinking about how are ways that we can mend these amongst ourselves, amongst our community. How are ways that, you know, Eden mentioned before, we have to weed out some of these behaviors, right? So I think, you know, that's definitely, you know, one key aspect. And I guess, like, yeah, like, how do we start weeding out, you know, or what are ways, or what are some solutions either amongst ourselves or amongst our community we can start doing to, you know, prevent these bad traits or bad behaviors from being passed down?
I think we got to be able to own it. I think that's the first thing is being able to recognize it, own it, and have, you know, communicate about it, you know, being honest about, hey, this is where we can do better. This is where we can focus our attention to. And I think it's having those healthy conversations within ourselves, our families, and then with our, you know, just overall friendships. And I think if we're able to at least be able to say, hey, this is where we lack, this is where, you know, I'm not afraid to be able to check ourselves. You know, one of the things we are so afraid to do is we don't necessarily are not open to just being able to just say, hey, you know, being critiquing each other, or being able to say, hey, this is where you could do better. This is where you could do this, whatever. There's nothing wrong. I think a lot of times we take that as an emotion, like the emotional standpoint, somebody trying to attack us. And so we can get the emotion out of it, of feeling like, you know, hey, somebody's out to disrespect us, or somebody trying to play us, or trying to get a one up on us. I think we got to be able to dismiss that and being open to it. And, you know, just being able to check ourselves at the door. A lot of times when we walk out, you know, we're automatically thinking about, oh, you know, we can't do this, or we can't do that, or we have this certain negative connotation. We got to be able to just get all that out and be able to really be open to really change. That's for sure.
Nah, for sure. I definitely like that. You said kind of like checking yourself at the door and being open to change. I think definitely, like, you have to be able, you know, accountability is one aspect, you know, but then also, like you said, like, you have to be able to have that mental capacity to accept feedback. You know, I think about work all the time, right? Every quarter, every so, we have to, you know, meet with our manager, get feedback. This is what you're doing well. This is what you got to work on, right? And I think that's an important aspect to be doing in our everyday lives. And I think, you know, amongst your friends, sort of, you know what I'm saying? Kind of like checking your friends a little bit, right? They always say that your behavior is going to be like the people you spend your most time with, right? You're going to be, they say, you know, birds of feather flock together, all these different, you know, pretty much all these different phrases to talk about, you know, your company and who you're around. And I think one key aspect about, you know, having good friends, you know, is being able to, you know, give feedback and be like, yo, bro, like, nah, you shouldn't be doing that. Like, you know, I know maybe you think it's funny or whatever, but like, I don't think that's a good, you know, habit. I don't think that's a good trait, or maybe I don't think you should have said that, you know, and not being offended. Obviously, you know, there's also, like, an art in saying things, right? Because you can check somebody and say something to someone in a rude way and they won't understand it. But, you know, being positive here, right? You know, being able to check your friend, check your boy and be like, hey, like, I don't think you should be acting like this. I don't think that's a good behavior. I don't think that's a good trait. And meaning it wholeheartedly, not in a I'm judging you way, not in a I'm trying to, you know, be rude to you way, but in a genuine, I love you as a brother. I love you as a man, you know, so I want to make sure that we're doing, we're helping each other grow, you know, and I would hope that, you know, you do the same thing for me. If I'm out of place, I'm doing something that shouldn't be, you know, you're checking me and making sure, you know, I'm being all right. You know what I'm saying? So I think that's the key part.
I think, building off what you said, it just really, like I told you offline, Bensky, it comes down to also, listening to, Black men. Once we have these conversations, of course, you know, like, so like Chris said, it starts with having these conversations, and then two, it starts with listening to Black men, because you're not gonna, you know, in the term of Black masculinity, you're not gonna find any answers by listening to a white scholar, you know, publish whatever, you know, this, that, and the third they publish, or what, you know, an emotional response. You know, you have to listen to Black men. If it's Black masculinity, you can't not give us the space to talk about our experiences, what it means to us, and how we want to do better. You can't mute us and silence us. It comes with just listening. And on top of that, like you said, accountability also plays a role into it. So realizing our part in our negative behaviors and just continuing to make that change.
I like that. So for me, I think it's obviously spaces like this, like Chris said, like we got to create spaces like this. But I also think like really important is we have to create those spaces amongst Black women. I mean, I'm telling you, like, obviously we can do a lot by ourselves, but we won't fully get there just with us. Honestly, I think need is a main word for me. Like, you know, obviously we need Black women, you know what I mean? Just like we all know that Black women need us. But if one party is thinking that you're putting out a message, or you're putting out energy thinking that, making them think that they're unneeded or unwelcome, or they can't speak freely, that's only going to cause problems. And we can cry about it, we can bellyache about it, but that wouldn't be masculine. You know what I mean? Obviously, the masculine thing to do is to figure it out. In a perfect world, I would love to get back to a point where we truly listen to each other. And amongst the brothers, that's great and that's fine, but we have to figure out a way to cultivate and introduce these comfortable, safe places for women to give us positive and negative feedback, like Bensky said, and we have to receive it the right way. Because if we create these spaces amongst women and we show that we're truly our leaders and we're willing to embrace those positive and negative aspects about some of the things we enact every day, we're going to be empowered. Like, when you lean into women, women are naturally going to lean into what they feel is powerful. And that's real powerful. Like having that code of conduct, holding ourselves accountable, but also saying, yeah, what you said may be right, but we're just not going to listen to you say it. You know what I mean? Like, we got it. But if we don't got it, then we can't claim that. We can't say, yeah, that message about our crime in our communities it's a great message, but we need to take it more seriously when we say it. You know what I mean? I forgot what it was, but it was a quote. He said, you ever want to find out what a Black person really thinks? Put them in front of a white person. I think it was Malcolm X who said that. You know what I'm saying? We have to like shed that mentality where we feel like we have to be different amongst ourselves and then another way out in society. Because if we don't have that code of conduct, we're never going to be backed up, positive or negative. We're not going to hold the negative side accountable. You know what I mean? You know, we're going to have the R. Kellys running around, running them up. But then also the people that are really the leaders of our community, the people that need that backup, we're not going to have a leg to stand on. We're going to feel fearful to back them up, even if they're speaking truth. You know what I mean? So we just got to have that duality. Obviously, I can say this, and I think the true definition of manhood is realizing your place in the universe and realizing that, you know, we can rise as high as possible with women, but we only go as far as men take us. It takes, and you can reverse that however you want, but I truly believe that. You know what I mean? So that's what I think we can like inject into the form that we have here and this energy that we have. We got to take that out into our everyday lives, whether we're sons, cousins, nephews, I'm a husband, grandfather too. It's weird. I am a grandfather. We have to take that out into the world. You know what I mean? So.
Yeah, I think also to piggyback off what you said. Yeah, I mean, I feel like you said it, but the space to admit you're wrong on both ends, you know, or your assumptions about, I guess even whatever topic you think, you just need to have the ability to admit you're wrong. You know, you can't argue or discuss something with someone without being open-minded. We had an episode with Mouse Jones, and he was talking about how when he discusses something or he's in a room talking with people, he'll always listen to both sides no matter what. And I think that really needs to it needs to be more prevalent in issues like this, you know, because we can always go back and forth. You can always go back and forth arguing with someone, but you really need to read and listen and admit, you know, you're wrong. Especially if you're talking about a subject matter that may not affect you. So
yeah.
For sure. So on that note, do you gentlemen have any last words you want the listeners to take away? Any last points? It could be.
Hey guys, can I go first? Because, you know, obviously I'm a family man. I got to get home to my family. My wife is hungry.
Yeah, for sure. Brian, I know you driving.
So my last words, I'm gonna keep it very short and simple. Put love out there in the universe. You know, obviously try to be a master of your own destiny as much as you can. And to all the men, any man that comes across this, I want them to take from this, look, you know, create your own safe place. Don't be ashamed of who you are. And don't be ashamed of your place in the world, because if you know your place in the world, then you know where you need to be. You know how you can get to where you want to go. Don't get caught up in these false pretenses of what masculinity, what people think it is. And also the last thing, get real in tune with your emotions. And that's something that I'm trying to work on within myself, you know what I mean? Through therapy and through self-growth, like get in tune with your emotions, the good ones, the bad ones, all of that. Because being masculine is not always looking macho. It's mastering all of your emotions, period. So that's what I want to leave with you guys and leave with whoever follows the podcast. I definitely love all you guys. Appreciate having me. I mean, this is obviously, like, again, it's so new to me, but I'm honored to, you know, be able to fellowship with you, man.
For sure. We definitely appreciate that, Brian. If you need to hop off, feel free to do so. We want to make sure that you get home safe. So
yes.
For sure. So we thank you very much for joining us on conversation. Definitely very insightful. I learned a lot. I hope you listeners learned a lot from them as well. Get home safe. Enjoy the rest of the evening.
And hey, Bensky, hit me up later on, and Dean, give me your information too. Okay.
All right, for sure.
Definitely.
All right, Chris. Hey, Chris, much love to you, man. You have a good one.
You too.
All right, for sure. All right, Chris, if you want to go, do you have any last words?
Use your best judgment. You know, one of the things is that, again, a lot of what you heard tonight, a lot of what you heard in this episode, they're all relevant to what our social makeup, and you have to just use what feels based on your gut instinct. And if you know when something is not right, call it out. You know, being open, not afraid to be able to speak up. You know, I think one of the things I could tell you from, you know, my, growing up and everything like that, I didn't have a father in my life until I was 13. So I had to derive some of the things that I seen just from around me. I didn't know where to pull the best judgment out of. But I think one of the things, again, you have to be able to do is find people who are mentors. You know, go to somebody that's honestly a brother that's doing it in your community, in your family, that you can look up to. I think that's something that I had to be able to accept and be open to have. And just being able to seek the knowledge, you know, as long as you fellowship with people that actually are doing it, older brothers. I always say, if you can go to older adult people, older adult men, you'll gain so much knowledge about who you are as a person, and where you're going. So I think that's going to be the best thing to do.
For sure. Always seeking wisdom, man. Always seeking wisdom, for sure. Edom, any last words?
So I feel like this is such a reoccurring theme a little bit in my life, because I'm starting to listen to more and more podcasts, and even Brian kind of just said it, but I think therapy is really good for specifically Black men. Or just don't be afraid to talk about your emotions. Again, I mean, I don't have a therapist, but I feel Bensky is kind of my therapist, or even like my sister. I've been relying on her. We've been when I was down in Virginia, she was like in my apartment for a good month, so we would talk. So I think therapy. I used to knock it a lot, like years back when my sister first started, but I really think therapy is a really healthy tool. If you have, I think just being able to put into words how you feel is just so relieving, and so it's positive, because once you know and pinpoint what it is, you can work on it. And even just having it's usually a one-on-one group, one-on-one space where you can just talk about your emotions and how you feel. And like I said before, even if the person doesn't know how you're feeling, they can just listen.
For sure. Yeah, I would have to agree and kind of piggyback off of all that. Like, accountability, we use that word a bunch. And I think it's just being aware of, like you said, being aware of your actions, being aware of your emotions, being aware of your reactions. Can't always, control necessarily your environment. To an extent, you necessarily can't control your environment. Maybe like if you're born into a certain situation, you may not be able to control, certain situations that happen to you, but you can always control how you react to it. That's almost like a quote by Mewtwo, in that movie. You may not be able to, like, the circumstances of one's birth, something like that. You can't necessarily control that, but you can always control how you react. So I think, just being aware of your actions, reactions, of your emotions, being aware, really understanding how you act and how you kind of play a part. I think that's very key. Again, I don't necessarily have a therapist, but I'm glad that I do have people I can go to when I do feel a certain way, or, I can, express my emotions and things like that. And I can always do better, that's something that we can always do. But I think that's definitely, definitely comforting. I'm also a man of faith. So I think, that always helps. That kind of helps keep me down too, like prayer and all that stuff. So I think, finding what you can to really, have downtime. And I think one last, also piece of advice, personally, what I like to do kind of like at the end of every day is kind of just take quiet time to kind of just reflect. I think maybe that's like the last, big part, just being able to reflect on yourself. What did I do today? How did I act? What happened? You know what I'm saying? What can I do better tomorrow? How can I be a better person? How can I be a better, whatever, son, husband, wife, whatever. I think really just taking time every day, just sit there, really just reflect on yourself and just see how you can be better. It may seem so simple, but like it really does, do a lot when you can really take time and be like, that's how you put in practice that accountability. Okay, what did I do today? Maybe I shouldn't have reacted like that. All right, next time I'm in that situation, let me try to do better, and it sounds simple, but it can really, really do a lot. So that's my last input on that note. I want to thank you guys. Well, Brian hopped off. So Chris, I want to thank you very much for hopping on today's episode. But before we go, I want to make sure that you are telling the audience about, your Culture Unplugged, all the, things that you're doing. So I want to take some time for you to shout out your socials, let people know what you're doing, where they can follow you and all that good stuff.
Sure. Thank you, brother. So I've started a platform to really help young Black men thrive. And I kind of piece back to some of the experiences and mistakes that I made as a young man and in my 20s. And, always this running theme of, I wish I could go back to redo the things that I did so that I could, take a better streamlined path forward, but we can't do that. So, and what do I do? I want to be able to say, hey, let me create this platform on YouTube called Culture Unplugged, where I can be able to talk about the challenges that we face as young Black men. And that's going into anxiety, depression, fashion, mistakes with women, especially, going into work at a corporate America or being able to handle relationships on a personal or even a regular professional level. So I am talking about all of those things so that you're able to grasp, new success for yourself, and you're not making those same mistakes. But you can definitely contact me directly through Instagram at coveredculture_ and at cultured unplugged as well. Of course, if you go to YouTube, also cultured unplugged. I'm releasing new content on a weekly basis. Already have 4 episodes up on there. You might even see 5 by the time you actually see this episode. So definitely keep it locked with us and stay unplugged.
Man, I love it. Love to hear it. Edom, do we have any closing items? Nothing really.
No, I don't think so.
We do
Stay
got some
tuned
new
for more.
merch.
There we go.
Yeah, but we do have some new merch that ain't out to the public yet. But shout out to Sosa. He was on our podcast. He made our Black Lives Matter hoodies and he made our Everybody Eats. So we gotta give a shout out to him and our black businesses. So you can see embroidered, right? Because everybody loves embroidered. Plus with the black silk on the inside. So we got some new drips on Everybody Eats. We got some hoodies, t-shirts, long sleeves. So these are a little bit exclusive right now to us, but maybe in the future if we can get some demand, we'll have that out to the public. He also made that beautiful Black Lives Matter hoodie that
tie-dye, nice little silk on the inside.
Yeah. So shout out to Sosa. Shout out to all our black businesses. We gotta represent.
What'd you say, Chris?
I was asking who designed the hoodies? Who designed the
It's our boy Sosa. He was on a podcast, but he's the one literally grinding these out. So we just sent him like, yo, like, can we make some hoodies for us? He's like, I got you. So he's been one putting the embroidery with the silk on the inside. So
that's a good look.
For sure. So he's been doing that. Man, on that note, all our social media plugs, subscribe to our YouTube channel. That's Everybody Eats Podcast on YouTube. We're really trying to grow up the channel. We have all our videos up there. So make sure that you're liking, subscribe, doing all that, sharing with your friends. Twitter, Instagram. Make sure you're following us on all those platforms. That's where we're at. New episodes coming out every week. Man, I think that's it. Stay safe, stay healthy, and wash your hands. Peace.
Yes, sir.